Today is known as Tax Day across the United States. Well, today it's Tax Cut Day in Minnesota. We have almost $500 million in tax cuts that are going to Minnesota families and businesses. That's right. That's something to be excited about too, right? And we have a couple of families here today who are beneficiaries of the reductions that the legislature and I made. So without further ado, I'll turn over to Commissioner Frans, and he can enlighten us from there.
Thank you, Governor. Well, good morning. As the Governor mentioned, today is Tax Cut Day for Minnesota. As many middle-class Minnesotans and small businesses. What we wanted to do today is to give you the real show today are the families who are benefiting from these tax cuts. And so I just wanted to give you a quick, just a 1-minute update on where we are for filing and making these changes for these tax cuts that these families are benefiting from. Right now, we've completed all of the changes and adjustments on April 2nd that people have been filing. We have about 2.2 million Minnesotans have filed as of last night. We have about 500,000 to go today, and some will come in a few days late, but we have about 500,000 to go. And we're really fortunate that people are filing on time. We have 92% people have filed electronically thus far. 80% of people are receiving direct deposit refunds. So the key is file today, obviously, if you can't file today, file an extension with the IRS. That will also work for the Minnesota Department of Revenue. If you've already filed, as I mentioned before, we'll review your returns and see if anything needs to be adjusted, and we'll contact you in the future if we need to. So one of the things that we really wanted to do was, in terms of passing these tax cuts, they were passed on March 21st. The governor signed the bill on March 21st. On March 28th, we completed the internal changes. On April 2nd, we made all the changes permanent, and the software providers did. So today, we're joined by several Minnesota families who benefit from these 2013 tax cuts. They're all listed over here on the board. But I first of all want to introduce Mark and Janet Zuzik. They're teachers. Mark is a principal, and Janet is a special ed teacher. They have 2 kids in college and one who's graduating from high school, Alex. Over here, they're wrong side. There we go, Alex. Yeah, I don't think Isaac and Hattie are quite ready. They look pretty smart though. So we have the Zuziks that are here, and thanks to the Zuziks, they're able to deduct tuition charges for their daughters who are both in college and are on their way here today. Actually, we have some been able to save them some taxes because they're able to deduct the tuition deductions. And also Katie, their daughter, who's a senior in college, will graduate this year, and she'll have the benefit of paying off those loans next year, and she'll be able to deduct the interest from those loans next year. But I'd like to introduce Mark right now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Suzik. I'm a principal in Hastings. I just want to thank the governor and the legislature for passing the middle class tax cuts. This is a big deal to our family. We're able to save some money, which of course is going to go straight to tuition. But for us, it will be a savings of $160 per year because of the tuition program. And it will also, beginning next year in the 2014 year, it will also save us approximately $200 a year because of the middle class tax cut that eliminates the marriage penalty. And of course, you know that college is expensive. I'm very proud to say that all 3 of my kids are intending to be teachers. Katie, who will graduate in May, will be an elementary teacher. Hopefully she'll get a job right away, if anybody's out there hiring teachers. And my daughter Abby will graduate in a year and a half as a music education teacher, and my son Alex will be beginning college next year at St. Mary's, and I'll have Alex share with you what his plans are. My son Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex, and as you heard, I'm planning to go to St. Mary's University down in Winona next year. I'm a senior at Hastings High School right now, and this tax cut is going to benefit me as well as my family, as my dad said, in paying for tuition and stuff. That we'll have some extra money for that, and then as well as when I graduate and I'm starting to pay off those loans, that'll help me there too. So I approve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mark and Janet and Alex, for your dedication to teaching and also your dedication to higher education. I'd now like to introduce Christy and Aaron Norman. They received about $10,000 in adoption assistance from their employer last year to adopt, and they found out that because Minnesota did not have the adoption expense conformed to, they were going to owe $800 in state income tax. But because of this conformity provision passed this year, just on March 21, they will not have to pay that state income tax on that adoption assistance they got from their employer. So I'd like to have Aaron come up for a moment and say a few words.
So last year we adopted our daughter in January, and in mid-year we found out that we were going to need to pay taxes on some of those monies, and we had, raised a lot of monies to try to help pay for adoptions. Adoptions are expensive, so we were surprised to know that we were going to have to pay more taxes on some of the monies we received from our employer. But we were so thankful to hear about the changes made this year that were made in the legislature. It was a wonderful thing that they did to make these monies provided by my employer tax-free. So we're very thankful.
Thank you very much, Aaron and Christy and Isaac and Hattie. It's really great to have you here. We just want you to know that we are so happy that they were willing to share their stories with us, and I'll let the Governor Dayton close out the remarks.
Well, Abby and Isaac can leave whenever they like. I'll probably go along with them, and the rest of you can stay if you like. But no, thank you please don't need to stay around. It doesn't work that way. Thank you very much for coming. Really, really appreciate your being here. You got two great kids, and I'm glad they're tax-free for the time being. Yeah. They have two kids in college if you want to talk about what the future holds for you. Thanks.
More questions for the Normans if they would like to answer, Governor.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Do we ask the Normans?
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, by all means.
Sorry to take you away from that.
No, I was going to take them away from you.
Sure. Tell us what it's like to adopt children, and you mentioned that it's difficult and expensive, but did you expect that and then get hit with a bill?
We didn't. Yeah, we didn't expect, as far as taxes, you mean, goes?
Yeah, the whole process, pull them up.
Yeah. So, yeah, you never know. Both our children were born here in the U.S., and we had no ideas. We knew the expenses, what they might be for the actual adoption, but as far as the taxes goes, that was not something we were aware of. So it actually they didn't exist. They weren't there when our son was born, so that's why we didn't expect them when our daughter was born.
And with adoption, as much as it is a blessing, it is expensive, and every time you turn the corner, you feel like you're writing out another check to another agency, and you're happy to do it, but sometimes you don't have the money, So that's where it's been awesome to have family and banks that support you. But as you get a little sticker shock, I guess, as you keep writing out the checks, and then in the end, you bring home a beautiful baby and you forget about the money. So I think the reason the tax thing was a little shocking to us is because we had forgotten about the money, we had paid it all off, and we were really grateful. And then we just looked forward to being done with the expense portion of the adoption.
You look very busy.
We are busy. Yeah,
sorry, we're from Rochester, so we had an hour-and-a-half drive, and so sorry, our kids are a little stir-crazy right now.
They want to run.
They want to run and take your cameras and help you.
But
How much were you able to save because of this latest tax cut?
yeah, it was between $700 and $800 that we were able to that we are not paying in taxes. So yeah, that's a good question. And one thing I wanted to just point out with Christy is, some of the costs with adoption are actually very similar to having a baby born in a hospital. They average around $20,000. And so in medical expenses, those things are reimbursed through your medical insurance. And through adoption, unfortunately, those things are not always reimbursed, and so you have to raise that money on your own.
Maybe a little bit of a personal financial question, but with this $700 or $800 of savings you're going to get off of this, I don't know if that's in terms of a rebate that you're getting, but how are you planning to spend that? Are you going to save it? Are you going to do a college fund for your children? Or?
So we're actually not getting any money. This is just money that's tax exempt. So the $10,000 that we received from my employer, that money is just not going to be taxed as income. So that's what's happening. We're not getting a credit or a refund or anything. It's just being tax-free. So that money that we're saving from paying in taxes, I think college is expensive right now, as these people share over here. So we need some time to start saving for that.
but it saves us, the money now that we don't have to come up with another $800, to tax on, or to add on to the expenses of what he's saying.
Thank you.
Question for the students?
So how are you going to pay for college?
Well, so far what I'm thinking is I'm obviously going to have some loans and stuff. My parents are going to cover an amount. I have a pretty good portion of it covered with scholarships, both academic and some leadership and some music and stuff. So with scholarships, some from my parents, and then the rest I'm probably going to have to take out loans on and stuff. So.
Does that make you nervous a little bit?
Some, but I don't know. I don't worry too much in general about anything, so I haven't thought about it too much, but I'm sure someday I will be far more worried than I am today about it.
You sound like my son.
Any other questions for the families?
Okay, thank you. Any other questions then on this subject or anything else?
Commissioner.
Thank you very much
Commissioner
for
Frans.
being here. Thanks for coming from Hastings, and thank you for coming from Rochester. Rochester with 2 children your age, that is a real act of devotion. Thank you.
Commissioner Frans, do you have an update on the notification and process and timing for those who had filed but may be getting an additional amount back?
Yeah, for all those folks who filed before April 2nd, before we made the form changes, before the software was changed, so if you filed before April 2nd, all you need to do is wait at this point. We ask you not to do anything, and what the department's going to do is we're going to do a 3-step process. We'll go through all the returns that we think qualify, and we'll adjust those returns if we can, send the refund. Then number 2, for those returns we can adjust, we need more information, we'll contact the taxpayer by letter, ask for the information, and then make the adjustment and refund. The final category, number 3, is for those folks who we need to have them file an amended return. We are now, just as today is the final day of filing, once we complete this day, in the next week or so, we will do another update about how many files and how many returns we think are in those different batches. And at that point, we're going to be able to give a date by which we can tell you you'll be notified. But we want to study how many returns are there first.
Commissioner, have other people's refunds been impacted at all by the changes you've made, and the people who weren't in line for some of these tax breaks, has that altered how quickly refunds are going out the door?
Not yet. As of last night, the average turnaround for an electronically filed return was 7 days for the refund to be received by the taxpayer, and that's been true throughout the last month or so. That has not been affected. It's about a little over 2 weeks for a paper return to get a refund. So as of last night, that turnaround has not been affected for the refunds going out.
Governor, today you're calling it Tax Cut Day, but Minnesota remains one of the highest tax states in the United States. Is that important to you, and is it something that is significant to business or jobs or the like?
Well, there are varying reports that have different analyses from the Minnesota tax organization. We rank 15th in state and local taxes per capita, and there are others that have us in other places. Any ranking below that would be preferred, but I don't think we're a low tax state. We've never been a low tax state. We're a high value state. And if you look at the fact there are 155,000 more jobs in Minnesota than there were 3 years ago, I think that's a good testimonial from business leaders as well as from their stockholders that their companies are doing well under Minnesota's overall plan.
Governor, what do you say to the folks who saw their rates go up under the budget that passed last year, who aren't really feeling that this is tax cut day?
Well, the wealthiest 2% of Minnesotans are the only people who got an income tax increase over the time I've been governor, and quite a number of them were given tax cuts in this last tax bill. To those 2% who are at the very top of the income, we appreciate very much your help in working our way out of a deficit situation. A year ago at this time, we were looking at a projected budget deficit of $625 million for the next 2 years. Now we're fortunately looking at surpluses. Because we were able to raise the income taxes on the very wealthiest Minnesotans, we were also able to eliminate that deficit, to finish paying off the school debt which we inherited from before, and to make the kind of investments in all-day kindergarten, early childhood education, tuition freezes for Alex and others in that situation all over the state. So we were able to do a lot of good with it, and I'm grateful to them for supporting that, really going along with that undertaking, and I think the state's better off for it.
What do you mean by high value state? We have a high tax state, as you acknowledge, but you say it's a high value state. What does that mean to you?
Well, we have a very excellent workforce. We have one of the best in the country, in the world, people who are hardworking, well-educated, productive, and company after company has been expanding here in Minnesota at a pace that exceeds the nation because they recognize the value they receive here, and it's primarily because we have tremendous people. We have excellent business leaders who are good entrepreneurs and are good money managers, but they can't do it by themselves. It's the people of Minnesota who are really responsible for our success.
Do you anticipate any more tax cut bills?
I believe there'll be another tax cut bill that'll come after the legislature returns. I hope it'll focus on property tax relief and also on the child care tax credit that I proposed in my original message, and which I still believe would be of enormous benefit to people whose child care taxes, child care costs are going up astronomically. And it's just staggering to me how people with very young families are spending $10,000, $15,000 per child, and it's just an outrageously high cost. So we need to find ways that we can relieve that burden.
Governor, what's your impression of the pace of the legislature thus far, and are you kind of pushing them to end early?
Well, I've heard, as my 38th year I've been in a legislative session, and I've always heard predictions at the beginning that they're going to end sometime early, and I can't remember a time when that's happened. So I start with that expectation. They should take the time they need up until May 19th, the statutory or constitutional deadline, and make decisions. They accomplished a great deal already with the major tax cut, the bill, a couple weeks ago, and the anti-bullying bill, and now the increase in the minimum wage. So if you look back at the top agenda items, they've already gotten through several of them, and I think the bonding bill and the further tax cut are the two remaining top priorities, and others that they have to go through. So, I think it's been a very, very productive session so far, and I think it will continue to be so.
Governor, Republicans point out it was a $1.2 billion surplus, but the tax cuts have been about half of that, and they think it should be more. Your response to that?
Well, they should tell us what they want to, cut as a result. I mean, they've always been for less spending, but they never tell us where they want to spend less money. Should we eliminate all-day kindergarten? Should we not provide early childhood tax credits? Should we unfreeze the tuitions at our University of Minnesota and MISCU campuses? I mean, there's a trade-off involved between tax revenues and being able to spend that money for things that are important to people and people care about. So, if they want us to forego spending on transportation, they want us to forego spending on education, they need to be specific. And I spent 2 years in 2011, 2012, asking them time after time after time, what are you going to cut? What do you want to cut? What do you want to cut? And never got an answer.
I'm talking about the existing surplus.
Well, again, we're proposing to put about almost half of that back to people in tax cuts. Another 150 million so far. I hope it's higher in the budgeted reserve. And then we're still negotiating what the spending increases will be. Mine is $165 million, of 84 million of which is for the personal care attendants, which a lot of Republicans support. The $20 million for the propane shortage was passed unanimously in both bodies. So there's over 100 million that the Republicans in majority support, which I'm glad they did. They're important expenditures. And, the House and Senate at this point are above that mark, but we haven't begun those negotiations yet. So, I mean, we have our differences to be sure, but I don't think we're that far apart.
The House and Senate tax cut bills, the second version, just over 100 million in each case. Is that in your ballpark too?
Yeah, I guess it's close to $550 million total, and I think that's as I say, not quite half of the total budgeted surplus, but I think it's a prudent number. And as the last results from the Department of Management and Budget in terms of revenues collected the first quarter of this calendar year versus the projections, It was slightly below, about 2.5% below, which reminds us that these are all projections and that none of it's money in the bank yet. So I think that kind of caution is prudent.
Governor, were you too aggressive with the tax hikes from 2 years ago if you are giving this money back in different forms now?
Well, no, because again, we had a forecast end of February of 2013, which predicted a $625 million deficit for this the biennium that we're in now, where they're now predicting $1.2 billion surplus. We had still over $1 billion that we owed the schools from previous borrowing, and we wanted to make the investments that we did in early childhood education, all-day kindergarten, other aspects of education, economic development, transportation, and I think that was all money well spent. And not as a result, but in sequence, the Minnesota economy improved as one of the fastest growing economies of any state in the nation in 2012 and again in 2013, and it exceeded the projections that were made back in February of 2013, and we're grateful for that. So we have a very, very different situation going from a $625 million projected deficit for this current biennium to a $1.2 billion surplus. That's what almost $2 billion of change in less than a year. So we're very fortunate, and it's great that it happened, and so we're dealing with the situation now as it exists now. We dealt with the situation a year ago as it existed then.
Any first impressions on the first quarter campaign finance numbers?
I haven't. I looked at mine. I haven't looked at anybody else's. I don't know what they are at this point. We're all constrained. Those of us who are, well, like everybody's constrained in the same way about, during the legislative session. I think that puts a damper on everybody's fundraising. But
close the door to putting personal money in this time.
Well, I haven't put any in so far, and I haven't made a final decision one way or the other. But at this point, I haven't put any in.
Would you qualify for the personal subsidy if you don't this time, or the subsidy, campaign subsidy?
I'm within the boundaries of that part of the law that would make me eligible for the public finance. If that's your question at this time, yes.
Is that something you're still waiting? I'm sorry.
Something I'm considering, yes. We're waiting to see. It's a couple of weeks until the campaign finance board comes out with their estimate of how much money candidates will receive this year. That's certainly a factor, but that would limit me to $20,000 the individual contribution. So it's something we're considering, but haven't decided on yet.
Governor, even if legislators take all the time they need until the end of the session, you're going to give a State of the State speech almost at the end of the session. What are you going to talk about?
The future. I mean, the future of Minnesota, and it'll be in part of what the last 3.5 years we've accomplished, and also the last couple of months. I've yet to find a single Minnesotan out there who's asked me anxiously, when am I giving the State of the State address? So, I think it might have a little more import within these walls, and maybe it doesn't even here. I don't know, but anyway, it's going to be a future-looking speech and talk about what I think lies ahead, what Minnesota's challenges are, not in a partisan or political way, but in a way that I believe is necessary for our state to continue the kind of progress that we've made over the last 3 years.
Any final questions? Governor, anything new on the tax breaks for the Super Bowl? The announcement's going to be made sometime next month. Does something need to pass this session, or do they just need a letter of assurance that something will happen?
They received a letter, and that's all that I'm told. That's all they need for this consideration. If the bill pass, if we're chosen by the owners, then I would think in 2015 there would be something which would be very small. The major tax concession is the foregoing of the sales tax on the sale of tickets, and that was passed for the 1992 Super Bowl, and it was not. Was not rescinded, so that's ongoing until somebody changes it. So that's about $9 million of tax incentives that are already there on the table if things remain as they are. And I understand there'd be a bit more, but if you look at the economics of that, and any reasonable expectation of what the additional revenues are going to be to the state of Minnesota is $30 million or more. If you look at what the benefits are going to be to the private sector, to all the businesses, bars, restaurants, hotels, all the establishments that tend to not have major traffic in the end of January, early February, they're going to realize gross revenues of over $100 million, and that will inure to tax benefits for the city and for the state. So from just you take away the word Super Bowl and you're offered this as a financial consideration, it's a no-brainer, really. The word Super Bowl certainly add all of the different elements to it, and I understand that people have different feelings about that, but it's no question it'd be a financial boon to the state.
Thank you all.
Witness the fact that Indianapolis is bidding again for the second time, or maybe they did before, and New Orleans has had it, I believe, 11 times before. They wouldn't keep bidding for the Super Bowl to come back if it weren't proven to be profitable for them. Thanks.